Well, welcome back to class and to CMU CS Academy Unit 9, Strings and While Loops, where we have just recently gone over the notes for Section 9.2 string methods with is alpha and is digit and is upper and is lower and upper and lower. Common things, yes, thank you, in many different languages, as it is here with Python. We are going to go over an exercise from section 9.2.2 together. And for that, I'd like to just do the first one. And certainly, if you have questions about it after we're done, send me an email, come to office hours. If you end up going over it in the other exercises and you get stuck somewhere, which these start to get more and more interesting, the more we can do with strings. But if you have questions, certainly email me or come into office hours. Okay, so let's jump into find the letter. Okay, so you'll notice a grid here, looks like a bunch of sevens. Your friend gave you an email address, but is that an O, or a 0? It's always hard to tell, so this is kind of like a game that plays off of that idea of some things are really similar to other things, and so it's a test of finding out, well, which one is the letter? Notice how one of the labels is unlike the others. Press space to highlight the different label with red. Did you spot it yet? Well, if not, you can always hit the space bar. Boom! There it is. Did you see it before? It's a capital T. Looks a lot like a 7 when there's a lot of 7s. So it's a nice, visual game here going on, right? Some trickery. Okay, so I'm going to start coding. Look at the code that they've provided for us already. And so if you scroll up, you'll see that you've got a background, you got some lines there. So the grid is made up of lines with dashes, in essence, another one of their tricks, right? If we just take this, for instance, and say, well, instead of 2, make it 12, right? And you run it, you can see that, whoa, see, those are the dashes. Those are the dashes, okay? All right, let's put that back normally. Okay, so there it is back normally. There is a group that's empty right now called labels, and gradually what we're going to do is add in each of these things in each of these boxes as a label to that group of labels. So there's a function called draw labels, and that's defined here, and there's a function called onKeyPress, and it says here, if key equals space, well, pass, right? So we are going to have to actually write that part of the code, right? We're going to have to write the onKeyPress inside this if, what happens as a result of hitting space, and that's the highlighting of where that letter is. Now, if you look at one of the test cases that they send a test case where they send a T and a 7. We could change this to an X and a 4, for instance, right? If we change this to an X and a 4, you'll see all 4s, and in one place is an X. Well, that's an easy one to spot, right? So let's change it back to the T and the 7. The idea is that we have a number, and we have a letter, not in that order, a letter and then a number, and that they're very similar. So one is hard to spot amongst the other ones, right? We can also do that with the O and the 0, as was suggested in the comments at the top, okay? Now, how does this work? How does it actually go through and draw things? I think this is an important thing to look at. We have 2 for loops, one nested inside of the other one, right? So we go to the outer for loop, and we start at the value of 0 for x index, and then we loop, while x index is 0, we loop through all of the y indexes 0 through 9, right? We go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So what's happening is each time it is calculating a center x and a center y, width or height of 40 apart each time, and if that index is 0, it's taking 1/2 times 40, so we're getting 20. The next time through, it's 1.5 times 40, so it becomes 60. So what we're doing is just locating the center of each of these boxes, right? 40 more, 40 more, 40 more, 40 more, 40 more, 40 more. Okay, so as we said, the first time through, we get the x index, and then we grab all the different y's in turn, and then we go to the next x index, and we grab all the y's in turn, and so on. That's the idea of nested loops. Once we do that, somewhere in here at the top, right, it is randomly picking a number from 0 to 9 for where the letter is placed. The letter X index and the letter Y index is the location 0 to 9 across and 0 to 9 down of where we're going to place the letter as opposed to the number, right? So if we hit that letter X index, letter Y index, we're going to draw the letter, otherwise we're going to draw the number, and that's the point of the if here. So that if our current X index that we're looping for is where we want to place the letter, if the current Y index that we're looping through is where we want to place the letter Y index, then in that case we will add a label with the letter in it. Otherwise, for every other place, every other location, if it's not the exact X and Y index, we're going to add a label that contains the number to it, right? So that's what we kind of have to test for in our code when we write our onKeyPress function. Okay. So our onKeyPress function here, you'll see if it's a space, we need to do this, right? So in that if statement, it says we want to loop over each label and check if it is a letter. So that's two separate things. Let's just loop over each label first. The labels are all in a group called labels, you'll recall. So we want to have a for loop. And if it's a bunch of labels, we could say, well, let's just pick up an individual label in labels. And you could do that labels or labels.children, either way. Right, so that's the setup of a for loop where we're looping through a group. That's a good reason why it's important to have that docs tab open. If you forget some of the details about working with groups, you can go back and look those things up, right? And especially since it's been a while since we've had class. Okay, so we're looping through the groups, looping through all the labels in the group, and then we want to check to see if it is a letter. Right, so we need an if statement. If the individual label, and remember that the labels group is made up of label objects, right? Whether that's a label object with a number or the label object with a letter in it, right? So regardless, remember that the property for the actual message in a label is what? It's dot value, right? So if label.value, and then we have a method now to test for whether something's a letter or not. If label.value is alpha, why they didn't make this camel case, I don't know. That always messes me up, but that is not camel case, right? So if label.value is alpha, if it is in fact a letter, and you could do this, right? You could say, is it true or not? Either way, this is going to either return true or false, right? So if it is true, then it is in fact a letter. And if it is a letter, then remember that's the one that we want to then highlight and change the size of the letter. We want to change its fill. Well, the fill is of course the property fill. So label.fill, and as you saw when we run the code, if we run the code in the solution, right, boom, it turns red. That is in fact red. If we hit Control and I use the inspector, it's red and its size, hard to see, but it's size 26. So I'm going to change the fill to, oops, not an emoji. We'll change the fill to red, and we will change the size, so label.size, change that to 26. Okay, now if we run the code and test it to see if it works the same, yep, there it is, right? And if we run it again and again, oh, you notice that's not still a T, right? Where'd the T go? Well, remember, it's random, right? So it's kind of game-like, right? In a game, we don't want it to always be the same. So if we run it again and again, pseudo-randomness, we get different locations every time. And if we wanted something other than T's and 7s, use a different test case. Play around with it. All right, so check the code. Delay, delay, delay. Oh, there we are. Okay, so we got it. If anybody has any questions, or if you have other comments about the code here, please email me, or you can pop into office hours. Thank you. Hopefully you weren't just watching this video because you thought I was going to play the accordion again. I mean, that would just be ridiculous. See you later.